Hello, everybody. This is a very special edition of INCON, Anthony Peake Consciousness Hour, because Sarah and I were discussing this, and we decided that we didn't really have a guest for December, and we did debate whether we go ahead and do a show or not. And then we decided that probably what would be nice would be to just put it out to everybody, in the sense that if you want to join in and be part of the discussions that we're going to be having over the next 90 minutes or so, you can actually join in with us as well, which is really good. And we've already got a few people that have joined in. Now, what we'll be doing is it's very much going to be a free ranging discussion with comments from the main room, and also comments from the chat room as well, and also on Facebook. Now, just to stress to everybody as well that this will be broadcast and will be uploaded onto my YouTube site in the next couple of days as well. So please, if you don't want to be featured within that, please by all means ask questions. But if you're happy to be, come in and live and discuss it with us. The other request I can have, please, is that Facebook has very strict rules on language and discussion items as well. So can we keep the discussion precisely to my work and my writings, and elements allied to that? Please, if we can avoid all discussions of a political nature or of a sensitive nature, or issues that will give offence to other people or cause argument, that's not what we want to be doing here. We're all friends here, and we all have our own opinions. And if we have opinions that are controversial in one way or another, we'd rather keep them to themselves. There are lots of other Facebook sites you can do that, and YouTube sites you can do that as well. Okay, well, it's really wonderful to see that we have a number of people here. And what our plan is what we're going to do is we're going to have a general chat about the high points and the low points and the frustrations and everything else of the shows over the last year. And we'd like your opinions on them as well. But what I'd like to do at the moment is there are three people who are already decided to be live in the chat room together with Søren and I. And I'd just like each of you to just give a very brief introduction to yourselves, one by one. So just going along the line here, Ricardo, if you could just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I live in Portugal. I'm for the last 20 years, 20, in a few years, I've been gathering information like books and videos, and since the beginning of the internet, really. So what I do now is I'm very active on Twitter. I try to share as many books as I can. I have about 300,000 in my catalog. Wow. With no novels, it's all information. So very few novels, unless they have historic interest. And the YouTube channel that I spoke, where I'm placing all those videos also too, so that people can I can at least share my curve of knowledge. And I must stress the fact that not all the videos that are there I do agree with all. I don't agree with all the information there, right? But I think that we should listen to every side of the story in order to make our own. So most people don't like to see things they don't agree with. I don't think that that's correct. I think we should listen to everything and then make our own opinion about things, and not exclude some parts of the information. We may fall in the same error that all others trying to fall. And besides that, I've been writing all these years. I never published anything. So I'm now doing small texts that I'm publishing in Medium, and I publicize them on Twitter. And I'm hoping to learn what people think of my writing, so that I can learn from the comments that I receive about what I write. So basically, that's it. And thank you for having me.
Thank you very much. It's going to be very interesting to have your involvement in this discussion. And the next one is a good friend of mine from Perceptions Today, a podcast that some of you will already be aware of, a podcast that I've been involved in doing something very similar recently, where we've been doing one 2 hour and one 3 hour sessions, which are already up on YouTube. And this is my friend from Perceptions Today. So would you like to introduce yourself?
Good afternoon. My name's Paul. As been said, I am the co-host for this, and also hosting other sections of our Twitter account as well when we do Twitter Spaces. Basically been involved in consciousness for many a decades. We've been looking from all the way down from quantum physics all the way up to astronomy, and also in between medical matters as well, along with pain management. And we get together, we have thoughtful discussions, and we normally do this on a regular basis, which has been very popular. And lots of people are becoming into the community and interlocking, looking at the areas where research overlaps, making new friends, and basically just advancing further through different fields of research. And it's an amazing time. It's all been happening very quickly in this area.
Wonderful. Yeah, we've had some quite interesting discussions already here. Delighted here to see Lehman involved as well. Lehman, at long last, we're in contact properly.
Yes, sir. I'm Lehman Dollins. I'm from Alexandria, Virginia, USA. I'm a self-taught 3D artist, and I just experienced very strange things. And because of that, I come across Anthony's work, probably 2012, 2013. And so far, he has the best definition of that explains what happens to me on a regular basis. And so I'm just like like everybody else, just trying to figure out what's going on in this realm. And I'm grateful to be here.
It's wonderful to have you here. I love your art. Your art is extraordinary. I really look forward to when you have the postings, these incredible images you do. You know, it's just quite incredible. So maybe we could chat a little bit about that later. Another good friend of mine, Joe Bartholomew. Hi, Joe. How was things with you?
Yeah, good, Tony. Sort of a coincidence came up actually because I'm at Brighton Therapy Centre at the moment, and I had a break, and by accident I booked a room from 3 till 4 o'clock, and so I can enter this room to talk to you. And I think Sarah messaged me, so I sort of it felt like the right time. I thought, oh, I've got to get to this room and be here with all of you.
Right, because Joe, you're heavily involved in a number of groups, aren't you, in South London and areas like that?
Yeah, like
And Brighton, isn't it?
Brighton, yeah, because I was
Brighton,
doing stuff, organising events with Radical Culture, and also I'm working at establishing an Indigenous and transpersonal therapy alliance. So we're looking at things to do with like altered states and transformation and how to reach human potential. And I really like your work with like in terms of the daemon and also like awakening the doors of perception is just like incredible. Like it resonates a lot with people I've met involved in spiritual crisis network when they go through like this sort of there's something goes wrong with the ego, or it's something shatters, and then they sort of work through a process, and it sort of brings up a lot of questions of what's really going on, like not to pathologize it and to actually explore what it really means. Like it all has meaning and it all connects and comes together.
That's excellent. That's really good. So I know you'll be involved because I know you have some fascinating opinions on these things as well. Uncle Leon, you're somebody new to me, I think. Can you tell us a little about yourself?
Yes, I would imagine so. If not, then that would mean you've heard something I've put out there, but I won't say you haven't, right? Yeah, so my name is Leon Williams the Fourth, better known as Uncle Leon. I consider myself, no, manifestation. I am an uncle to all. Yeah, so it's mainly for the Black community, because a lot of us grow up fatherless, but it affects more than just more than just Black people, because we're not the only ones that grow up fatherless. I have a podcast, I have a radio show. I met Andrew or Mr. Peake, I would feel more comfortable saying, on Twitter, one of the little Twitter spaces,
All right.
and sent me an invitation to this morning actually. Something didn't want him to meet, didn't want me to be here because he said he couldn't get the message through. I think. Anyways, I'm here.
Wonderful. Well, it's funny. It's funny actually. Probably because you're new to this particular show and everything else before. But the first person I worked very closely with was an African American lady who she and I set up the whole consciousness hour concept. A lady called Dia Nunez, and sadly we lost Dia through tragic circumstances last summer or the summer before last. which is really, really awful. You know, she was a great loss, and she was just wonderful. And you know, she was a priestess of one of the either she was either Haitian or Puerto Rican by background, and it was fascinating some of the things she used to bring into the conversations as well. So it worked extremely well. So welcome to us there. Right, next person is the wonderful Laura Stuckey. Laura, how the hell are you? Have we got you, Laura? No, maybe we haven't. As somebody has said, these Zoom conversations are very, very similar to mediums. You know, you're saying, "Are you there, Auntie Doris? We can't quite get through to you." So maybe Laura is somewhere there in Atlanta, trying to desperately to get through. Laura's been involved in my work for an awful long time, over many, many years. And the first time we met was when I did an event with Irvin Laszlo at the University of Milan, way back around about 6 or 7 years ago. And I know Laura's world changed soon after that, because she moved to the area I come from, Liverpool, where she met her husband, and the rest, as they say, is history. But Laura will probably explain that. And finally, within the group, and I'll probably stop asking people to introduce themselves because more and more people are now coming in. Marty, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
I certainly can. I wasn't planning to jump onto this call up until about 10 seconds ago when Sarah just tagged me into a post.
So what, you're at work, but you've managed to leap out?
I'm literally working at the moment from home, and I just got tagged into a post. So I thought, yeah, sure, why not? I'll jump onto the call and say hello in a completely unprepared way. So yeah.
Because I would say that probably you are probably the longest member of our little august group, because you've been involved in this work since right from the start, haven't you? You know, right from the really early days.
Yeah, I was telling somebody yesterday the whole story from start to finish, going back to like 2005 in how I read your book, got in touch, and then a whole world of crazy things happened. But been saying to a lot of people recently, actually, I really enjoy all the times when I have been a lot more involved in your work, you know, whether it's just, you know, reading your books, coming along to events, and just talking to you and meeting up with people in general, because seem to be more aligned to interesting things and synchronicities popping up and happening. And I don't know if it's just the energy of the people involved, but yeah, I've enjoyed it. I've enjoyed it over the years, and it's good to see you still going and picking up new people that are involved and talking about the things that are happening to them as well. So yeah, it's nice.
It's so important. And of course, Martin, it's always very strange that here I am in Crawley, you know, and you used to travel up from Crawley regularly up to Merseyside and up to London and everything else as well over the years. And as we said, we saw less of each other when we lived in the same town than we ever did, because you then go off to Brighton, where you're living a great time, which is interesting in itself, because I know that Joe is in Brighton as well. So, you know, there's two Brightonians there as well. And I'm told...
Yesterday, I was in Brighton yesterday, Anthony, and I did an escape room. Escape rooms are amazing. It's like great money for nothing. It's the most ideal business plan imaginable. Have to say, the escape room I went into was especially good, though. I'm well into escape rooms.
Right, tell us, we'll go back to Laura in a second. Tell us, escape rooms, you're a lady of mystery.
It's like a new, well, it's probably not that new, actually, a kind of like fad, kind of probably tagging on behind the whole like Netflix obsession with zombie apocalypses and ends of the world's dystopian futures. But we went to this one that was in the Brunswick pub in Hove, and it was called Dave, and it was this AI that was going to escape into the world.
An AI called Dave?
Yeah, it stood for something. Right. I can't remember what it stood for exactly. But anyway, it was absolutely amazing. It had the guy who used to do the voice for Holly in Red Dwarf in the videos. Mm-hmm. And then we had to do all these codes and like sort of tests to try to stop this AI from escaping. And it was amazing, good fun.
Wow. Okay, Laura, are you now with us?
No.
Hello?
Yes, hello. Laura, are you there?
Hello?
Hello, Laura?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm here. Can you hear me?
We can hear you, yes.
Okay, because I can't, I got in at 2 in the morning from Vegas last night, so I'm a bit out of it. Hold on. I'm trying to get the audio to come on. Anyway, I've got audio, but I don't have visual. That's okay though. How are you? How is everybody?
We're all well. We have visual on you, which is good. So we can see you, which is excellent. Yeah, because I was just explaining about how we met and how you made your way down
Guys,
to...
if I look pretty rough, as I said, we got in at 2 o'clock in the morning from Las Vegas for an early Christmas trip, and needless to say, you know, it's quite a trip from Vegas to back to Atlanta. So anyway, I just remembered that y'all were coming on today, so I was able to tune in just in time.
Wonderful.
How are things?
Oh, things are busy. Things are surprisingly busy. But one of the things that we decided to do, Sarah and I, was that we'd make this a very relaxing chat session, and link up with people and talk to people and discuss about the guests we'd had on the show over the year. And I think it works perfectly actually now that you've joined us, because you were one of the guests right early on. When we had something similar going on. But what I'd like to do now is to just discuss, I mean, now we've got the members of the group here. What I'd like to do is to maybe each one of you maybe give us a few minutes to describe events in your life that have been extraordinary and strange. So maybe, and we can then debate and discuss. So Laura, could you open up with the weird and wonderful things that happened in your life, and then we can pull...
Okay, I will, because actually the weird and wonderful things started for me when I read your first book. Okay, before that, you know, there were extraordinary things, but nothing really that made me think that anything was incredible until my story begins, believe it or not, with the death of a pet. And I'm sure you will remember the story, Anthony. I had a little dog and it died of a tragic death and very sudden death. And I was really unable to recover from it. And so I started wondering what happens when you die, you know, more than I'd ever thought about before. And this was because of a pet, because I wondered what happened to it. And I started researching books, and I was at the library reading things about life after death. And on the back of one of the books, it said other authors it recommended, and your name was on there. And I couldn't find your books in my library, and so I ordered one, and that was your very first book. And I sent your friend request, which you didn't answer for a while because you probably had no idea who I was. And believe it or not, on Christmas Eve, I was at my parents' house in Arkansas, and I don't know what you were doing on Facebook at Christmas Eve, but you answered my friend request. And at that point in time, I started reading your books, and I read one after the other, and I was not sad about my dog anymore. I started to think, wow, something incredible happens to us when we die, and possibly even animals. But because of that, I started reaching out to people in England that were your friends, and they became my Facebook friends. And there's one person in particular that you know of, who is our mutual friend. And that person knew what is now my husband. And to make a long story short, I ended up leaving a 15-year relationship here in America that wasn't working, flew to England, met my husband, who, believe it or not, was from where you are on the Wirral. And we met in the Manchester airport in person, and we've now been together for 7 years, and we're married, living in America. So that's my story in a nutshell. And then, of course, I continue to read your books because, in my opinion, if it had not been for you, my life would not have changed forever. And everything because of that became a synchronicity that happens to me over and over. And that's how I've met all these people that are your friends. And that's how we did the show with me and you and Ollie Stinton and all of that. So it's an incredible story, because I truly believe and have told everyone that because of your books and the things that you wrote, my life changed forever and in a better way than I could ever have imagined. That's my story.
Wow, thank you very much, because it was a delight when we first met in Milan, you know, and you were in the audience and everything else as well.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. And I left that part out. Yeah. I flew to Milan and actually met you in person. Yes.
Yeah, which was wonderful. One of the, by the way, hello to Stephanie Quick as well. Stephanie, can you just say a quick hi? Okay, maybe not. Maybe you can join in. Oh, yeah.
Hi, I'm sorry. It's just everything's really crazy here, so I've been muted. So hi, it's nice to hear everyone. And yeah, hi.
And where are you coming in from? Where are you joining us
Oh,
from?
I'm in Napa, California.
Napa. Oh, wow. Wow, you lucky lady. You lucky lady. How nice is that? All these exotic,
Yeah,
all these
beautiful.
exotic places, that everybody's at. Okay, that's wonderful. Well, welcome to the little conversation. It's going to be completely informal in terms of what we're going to be doing here and chatting. But one of the things that Lehman said earlier that I thought was quite fascinating when you mentioned about your experiences. And I just wonder whether, very quickly you could just mention one or two of them and things. We can't hear you, Lehman. You need to. We can't hear you.
Mute.
Oh, good.
How about now?
Good.
So when I was 12 years old, I was watching this television program about a place. I came into the show late. I didn't know where it was based out of, and I left before they said where it was, where the place was, the show was being shot. But I do remember turning to my little brother saying, "That is such a beautiful place. I want to live near there." And I was 12 years old, bebopping along, went on about my life. I was living in Austin, Texas when I was about 25 years old, and I had an incredible lucid dream. I was in watchmaking school. I was looking through a jeweler's loop. I had a complication in front of me, and I had a few little trinkets on the front of my watchmaker's bench, one of them being a resin Buddha and another one being a postcard. I woke up from that dream. At the time, there was only 4 or 5 watchmaking schools that in the entire United States, and one of them happened to be in my hometown of Paris, Texas. I called my father up and said, "Hey, if I get a job the second I get back, can I stay with you while I put myself through watchmaking school?" Sure. 5 months down the road, I'm sitting. I have a complication in front of me. There's the Buddha, and that morning I had gotten a postcard from my friend Tony, and it was very distinct. It was from New Mexico, and it was of these ghost dancers. And I had it sitting up there, and then I had the most incredible moment of deja vu. And the whole time dilation kind of kicked in and made it a little longer than it should have been. And I was completely aware that I had experienced this in my dream before. So all that to say, once I got my watchmaking certificate, I didn't want to work as a watchmaker, but I wanted to use my skills. And I reached out to a company that did work for the Department of Defense. I got the job, started work. Within the first week, a couple of the people there was like, "Hey, we're going to go over to Tampa, and we just want to show you around since you're new." Got in the car. Before I knew it, I was standing in Lowry Park Zoo, the place at which I had seen as a 12-year-old. And I lived less than 30 minutes away from it. So.
Wow, that is extraordinary, isn't it? The idea of future memory. And again, funnily enough, it's interesting that one of my favorite movies is Paris, Texas. So,
right.
And it is a wonderful, wonderful film. Very strange film, very curious film. But so in terms of that, so is anybody else, any of the other guys out there, have any of you had sort of future memories or deja vus that have come true, or dreams that have seemed to come true? I don't know whether we can put our hands up or whatever, how we could work that. Okay, Joe, what's your idea?
Well, I was getting a couple of nudges actually from the universe, because I noticed with Lehman, his picture went and then it went on to an eye, and I was just thinking of eyes, about some past that happened in the past around eyes, and also related to Sarah as well. And when I worked in a psychiatric acute care unit, if we were mental health crisis, like we'd have like handover meetings before a shift. And I remember one person who I worked with sort of had a chat with me and said she had a dream, and it involved me And then she was like, someone was holding a gun, and they were sort of like, and then I was trying to stop them using a gun, and it felt really dangerous. And then when she recalled this dream to me, I just felt, I don't know, an intuition there was something really wrong or something happened with a friend of mine who was going through some relationship problems. And what was interesting as well is, without jumping up too much, is some of the stuff I got interested in around different states, all the states and unusual things happening was when I made contact with Amanda Radcliffe. And she said a lot of my thinking around anomalous experiences reminded her of Arthur Gurdon. And he's supposed to be like a person who they question whether it's fictional or not, but it seems a lot of what his insights were expressing, there was a lot more to it. Like if you follow that intuition, and it seems like Amanda was going into the depths of that in her own experiences and exploring that as a mystic. And then what I know in terms of that experience I had with the dream is before I started doing events with Radical Culture in Brighton, I remember I met up with Sarah, I think it was, at Delaware Pavilion, which is like a building, it's like a cafe, but they also have like a downstairs art exhibition and an upstairs art exhibition. And downstairs was an exhibition of surrealist dreaming. And I remember and when I first met Sarah, because like she does lucid dreaming and lucid dream research, so it was sort of coincidental that happened downstairs. And then I think she sort of had to leave earlier than expected. And then there's another exhibition on upstairs that was of red eyes. I was thinking, what is this all about? Like eyes. And what was really weird is I read the writing about it, and it was like, and it said about it's symbolizing domestic abuse. And what was really weird is like around the same time, I was in kind of two friends as well on their Facebook, and one had his Facebook image of like dressed as Jack Sparrow with blue eyes painted on his face, and then the other one was an artist who designed some artwork with blue eyes on it. And then literally around this time, my friend just suddenly called me up, and she'd been attacked by her boyfriend just as I was literally by this exhibition that symbolized domestic violence. And then I don't know if like Sarah could like elaborate on, because I'm not very good with like Egyptian history and symbolism, because like I was thinking like in terms of like the red eye, the eye of Ra, and I don't know if like the blue eye is like a sort of protective like symbol, like ice, is it Isis? I'm not sure, like a talisman almost. And
the wadjet, the eye that you usually see as a protective symbol in Egypt is the wadjet, and there's usually sometimes you get you can call it the eye of Ra or the eye of Horus. Got various.
I hate to interrupt people, but it's on my
wow
hand.
Oh.
Here we go. This is Uncle Leon. This is the kind of magic that only happens on this show. Can we just go back to you there and just to show what your tattoo is on your arm? Okay, if you speak, so you'll go onto the screen.
Yeah, it's the Eye of Horus. Last year, a couple years ago, I got into the whole hieroglyphic thing. And yeah, it was actually like a rebellious thing while I did it, but the meaning as well. So yeah, it's on my hand now.
Wow. I love that. That's the kind of magic that I really, really love. That is superb. Sarah, could you go on a little bit more about that? And then we'll, if there's anything else you want to add to that.
Well, there's not really that much to say about the Eye of Horus and the Eye of Ra. It's usually a protective symbol in ancient Egypt, and can also be seen to represent the sun and the moon as the kind of eyes of the gods. So it's interesting that there's the red and the blue eye, because that's like the sun and the moon, perhaps. Yeah, I mean, I'm into magical amulets, and I also started learning hieroglyphs at the beginning of lockdown, and I think it's a really incredible language and language system to try to learn, because I kind of call it a holographic language in a way, whereby you have a full brain experience when you're trying to understand what the language means. The language is fascinating. So it has visual representations, and they can be pictograms, or they can be representative of phonetic sounds. So you get uniliterals, biliterals, triliterals. You get phonetic complements which reiterate the sound the symbols are supposed to represent, and then you get determinatives, which tell you the nature of the word itself. And then some of the glyphs are in and of themselves like magical amulets, and so they would have been worn all over the body. And you know, when you start to learn hieroglyphs, you start to look at temple inscriptions and ancient Egypt completely differently, because the art itself is a language, and you start to understand the symbology a bit more. Like, I really enjoy going to museums now because I feel like I have a deeper experience of the exhibitions, because I can understand a little bit. I can understand the gist, at least, of what a hieroglyphic inscription says.
That's fascinating. That's really good. And again, you know, building up sort of an idea. And I remember meeting you that day when you'd well, it wasn't the first time you'd obviously been to the British Museum, but clearly you were quite excited about the work you were doing. And of course, there's that wonderful photograph of you standing in front of looks like a sarcophagus or something, which was really interesting. I was just wondering, sort of perceptions today. You have your hand up. If anybody wants to speak now, so we'll get this rolling on, and we'll just, people when they want to come in can come in, and when they can't. So if you know the symbolism of how you use the images, Sarah, do you know? Could you explain to everybody how that works? If you know it or not, maybe Paul could. Sarah.
Okay.
Okay, Paul. Yeah.
So on the bottom row of your screen, you'll see that you have, going from left to right, mute, start, then you have participants, share, chat, then reaction icon. If you click on that, you will find that you'll be given another set of icons, and the bottom one will be raise hand, and if you click it again, it will lower hand. The other actual icons, if you click on them, say like the waving, thumbs up, the laughing emoji, and the others, you only click them the once, and they only stay up for a limited period of time. That's the way that those are used.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, well, I notice your hand's up and then Marty's hand up afterwards. So if you want to make your comment.
I was just jumping in on the fact of the Eye of Horus, and the fact that, as you know, that if you look at the brain sideways outside of the skull and slice it down to the corpus callosum, that they put the image there of the Eye of Horus going for the pineal gland and going for enlightenment. So there's loads of connection points to all the work that you do and everybody else researches. And again, back to Uncle Leon's tattoo on his hand, I just thought it was worthwhile bringing that one in.
Wonderful. Marty.
Hey, yeah, sorry, I'm going to do a bit of a swerveball, but I noticed obviously Laura on the call, and about a week ago, I put up a post on Facebook. I think everybody was arguing about the current events of the world in obvious cases. And I said, I really kind of miss the old days when we all used to just talk about the show Lost, because I just decided I was going to rewatch it. And Laura jumped in and said that her brother's, you know, really good friends with Matthew Fox, who was in the show. And if you recall, one of the stories I told was one of the strange moments I had watching that show, where I was watching an episode I'd never seen with my ex-girlfriend. I'd paused it when two of the characters were at a vending machine, told a story about how you could get the chocolate bar for free and get the money back by doing a little trick, turning the switch on and off, and then proceeded to press play after telling the story and have that almost exact story be replicated by the character Sawyer. So I've been watching Lost pretty much constantly for the last week or so, in between working, of course. And I'm already kind of deep into season 3, so I think that clip might be coming up again very, very soon. If it does, I'll definitely take a little recording. But yeah, I wanted to rewatch this show because it first aired in 2005-ish. 2005, I think there was 6 seasons. But there's so much like Icelandic themes in here, so much synchronicities, precognition, you know, multiple world theory, all these ideas. And it was being done like really well a long time before a lot of other shows. I know it's been in movies, as we discussed, for a long time going back, and other TV shows. But yeah, I thought that would be worth a watch. I thought it was funny because I saw Laura on the call, and yeah, she commented to say that her brother was good friends with,
yes. Yeah, and I think I told you that Matt Fox was actually the best man at my brother's wedding.
Yeah.
Which character was him? Which character was him? He in Lost.
He's like the main guy.
Oh,
The main
really?
guy. Yeah,
Oh,
the big
right.
tall, the real big tall, really good looking guy. Really good
Yeah.
looking.
Well, funny enough,
that was
a mutual friend of all of us here. That's been on the show 2 or 3 times now. Jim Elvidge. I mean, you probably know
right.
Jim had a poster on his Facebook wall for a long time with him with the lead female actress from Lost as well. I can't remember her name now.
I didn't know
I
that.
think. What was her name, Laura?
She's called Kate Austin in the show.
Right. Okay. One of the things I found about Lost was that I really loved it and I enjoyed the ideas and everything, but they seem to have so many ideas. They seem to kind of lose it somewhere. And I've got all the DVDs and I must rewatch them. It's like there was another great series. Do you remember, Marty, right at the start when we started discussing ideas, there was a TV series called Fast Forward?
Oh, Flash Forward, yeah,
Flash
because
Forward.
one of the characters in Lost is in that as well. And that was an amazing concept and idea. And like so many great shows, they got cancelled after one series, which is very frustrating. But yeah, that was really, really well done.
Yeah, because just to explain, Marty's very much our residential film expert.
And Anthony, don't forget them.
Yeah, go on, Laura. Oh, she's gone. We lost her. Laura, have we lost you? Yeah.
Don't forget. Then there became all these coincidences with Mary. Oh gosh, her last name escapes. Mary Young, that was in Blade Runner. Remember how that all came about? It was all these synchronicities that she was going to meet up with us in Milan, and she ended up knowing a mutual friend of ours, and it was really weird. It was a character in the movie, but for some reason, who you always, I remember, liked, her in the movie, and then all these coincidences started happening with that. And I thought, how strange is this? This is a character in a movie that's really a real person, but yet somehow she's become intertwined in all of us. It was very, you know what I mean? It was sort of like the movie was part of our lives or something.
Yeah, well, of course, what's extraordinary about this, just for anybody who doesn't miss that reference, we're talking about the actress Sean Young. And right. Sean Young was, if you don't necessarily know the name, you'll definitely know the character from Blade Runner, the Philip K. Dick novel, where she took off the android. And she has the most incredible entrance ever in a movie, where she walks in and turns around and said, "Do you like our owl?" And I just thought, extraordinary.
Right, that's right.
Now, somebody who would have been on the show today, he would have been joining us, but because he's traveling, he can't make it, is Jason Fitey. And as you know, Jason has been involved in my work for quite a long time. He's actually done a film called The Daemon as well, which is very interesting, was premiered, I think, last summer, or this summer, I should say. But he did a short movie with Sean Young, which was absolutely extraordinary, and Sean Young was fantastic in it. And there was an arrangement where Sean and I and we'd all meet up. But there's also somebody else involved in this group, Mike Fox, and of course Mike is a really good friend.
That's our mutual friend,
and he knows her really well.
Yes, he does. He does really well. He even messaged me the other day to tell me that she now lives in Atlanta because they have a lot of studios and are filming here now. And I sent her a message to see if she wants to have lunch. So it just keeps going on and on to just, as I call it, I call it wheels within wheels. Remember when I made up that little saying that, we're all wheels within wheels. But I mean, what are the chances? It's sort of like, what are the chances? And don't forget, there was the point in time when I was going to fly to Milan to go to the meeting, and she was filming in Milan. Remember, something happened and we weren't able to all meet, but we were going to. Remember?
I don't remember that. So that's even more extraordinary then, isn't it? That we had that kind of set of circumstances with Mary, and she's somebody I'd known for years now, admired her from her very early movies. And of course, she was even in the original Dune when she was very young,
that's right.
Which was intriguing in itself. I noticed that Paul has his hand up. Paul, what would you like to add to this?
I was just going to say, going back to Lost, they actually did have kind of a close for the second series, but everyone wanted to extend it because people saw it as popular. So they had to keep on trying to add more into it to try and keep it going for a long period where they could have actually just, nailed it down and had a really good ending. But obviously, the people who wanted more money out of it were stressing out the writers by trying to make them write things and not tying them together correctly.
Oh dear. Joe,
Yeah,
you're going to join in here?
I noticed yesterday that they have lost the missing pieces, which is like between the second and third season apparently. So I might need to check that out at some point.
Well, wasn't there, am I right in saying that within Lost there was a reference to Philip K. Dick as well?
Oh, I'm sure there would be.
I'm sure
Yeah.
somebody picks up, one of the characters picks up
Yeah.
the Philip K. Dick book and references it. And you might see in the background here, this book here, which is the exegesis of Philip K. Dick. And as you know, I wrote a book on Philip K. Dick. I've noticed again that, who did I see just had their hand up? Was it Joe? Joe, did you have your hand up before? You did, didn't you?
Oh yeah, I did. Yeah. What I was trying to link in with Blade Runner is I was thinking about forensic psychology, as in the study of like criminal offences and mental health. And what sort of struck me was earlier Sarah was talking about escape rooms. It's sort of like a sort of a thing that people like to go to, like an adventure. I don't know exactly what it is, but when I first moved to Brighton, someone I had a really big crush on, she loved these escape rooms that you could go to, like an event. And I think she studied a degree level, a forensic psychology degree. And recently, a friend of mine has a background working in forensics has gotten in contact with me and said his wife and child are going away to Australia, and he's got free time between the 1st of January and the 10th of January. And around this time also, I've been discussing with a few people about a book proposal on like a transpersonal vision applied. So applying like a transpersonal understanding of the world and what it means to be human, and bring it all together and how to apply it to our own lives. I wonder what's going on here in terms of forensics, criminal offences, lost, trying to escape, good and evil, like with Horus and with Ra. There's like a lot going on.
There does seem to be, and I think this is the thing, that this is why this group is being drawn together, and I'm sure of this. There's two more people that have joined in the room. I'd just like to say hi to Danny Torbeke. Danny, hi. And also
Hi.
D34. Danny, can you say hi and just introduce yourself very quickly?
Hi. My name is Danny, Dr. Danny Torbitzer.
Torbitzer,
sorry. Yeah, very good. Yeah. It was a good attempt. So, yeah, I'm living in Staffordshire at the moment, in Cannock, and I've enjoyed the talks. Sorry I was a bit late. I had another Zoom meeting I had to finish, but I wanted to come into this just to lend my support.
Excellent.
And say how much I enjoyed yours and Sarah's talks over the last few months.
Thank you so much, because what we might do is get on to that. In fact, maybe we'll spin off into that in a second. And I'd just like to say hi to Da Vinci, is it? Da Vinci 3? Hello? Oh, he's probably listening in, but clearly not. So does anybody else want to add to the conversation about Lost? And by the way, does anybody remember Fast Forward at all? Anybody put your hands?
I don't.
Right, because it was an extraordinary series, and we talked about it, Marty, didn't we? We talked about it quite regularly on the blog site.
I don't know whether it was the blog or the forum at that point, but I'd imagine it was the forum. I'm pretty sure it was the forum. What was the premise was basically everyone on the planet was asleep for like 2 or 3 minutes at the same time, and then there was all these intertwining lives and things, all these intertwining stories and things going on at the same time. Yeah, it was interesting.
And it was the clever concept that while they were all collectively asleep, they all had a flash forward to around about 3 years in the future. So they all had a split-second view of where they would be in 3 years in the future, which was then an interesting premise, because it was the idea, well, how do you get drawn to that? And there were so many interesting references to the stuff I was writing about at the time. I found it extraordinary. And I was thinking to myself, how weird this is, that I'm writing about this stuff. But if we talk, and if any of you guys are interested in checking this out, if you go on to the Anthony Peake blog site, which is still there. So we have some amazing material from 15 years ago now, where we were discussing. It shows how advanced, how far ahead of the curve we were in those days, in the sense of the stuff we were talking about and the films we were getting into and everything else as well, which was really, really good. But moving on now to the whole purpose of this show really is the shows that people particularly enjoyed and found of interest in the time when we've been doing the shows. So Danny, as you are somebody that have been watching a lot of the shows, is there any particular area of any of the shows or any of the guests that you thought, no, that was quite interesting?
There's one I missed, which I wanted to see, and that was the one with Eddie Fresca, and I just couldn't make it. So I think I've got an intuition that would have been my favorite.
It is up there on my YouTube channel.
I'll check it out.
Yeah,
for me, they were all interesting. The thing I would have liked to have heard more of, if that makes any sense, is the personal experiences. So I was interested in some of the reports. The guy that looked into the spiritualism stuff recently, but he was recording the stuff.
Steve Merra.
Yeah, hi Sarah. Yeah, hi.
I was saying to Anthony the other day, actually, that what I would really like to do is get Steve Merra back on and listen to some of those tapes.
Well, breaking news on this. I was in contact with Steve yesterday, and I said it would be really great if we could get something together fairly quickly. Now, Steve said he won't be available to join us in January, but probably February, because he's so heavily involved in this setting up of this Eric von Daniken theme park in Blackpool, which I find an absolutely extraordinary concept. And clearly he's putting quite a lot of money into this. But many of you guys will probably know that I spent a week up at Steve's studios in Manchester in early November, and we recorded 9 45-minute featurettes, I suppose, and each one was a theme on one of my books. And you're going to really love that stuff when it comes out. I'm not sure whether they're going to bring them out all at one time or whether they're going to bring them out one a month, but effectively the level of professionalism that these shows will be is absolutely extraordinary. These guys have a lot of money available, and they've got a lot of great high-tech equipment. And quite a few of the things that we discussed with Steve Merra, he discussed with me there. But Steve is very keen to bring along the evidence for this, because I think all of us, we find this fascinating, but I think we're all pragmatic enough to realize that extraordinary claims need extraordinary proofs. And many people will cite these things, but we need to see it. We need evidence for it. It wouldn't be exciting if we could hear those tapes that Steve Merra was talking about, where, the sounds were all around them and they were inside the bell jar.
Following on from that, I was trying to get my daughter into EVP, and I took her up to, there's a supposed haunted bit in Hastings, and we recorded some of the scenery around there to see if we could hear anything, but we didn't hear anything yet.
Oh dear.
Perhaps we need more sophisticated listening equipment.
We should try that. Lehman has his his yellow hand up.
Yes. So back to the interviews that I found the most interesting. Steve Merra is definitely up there. I mean, I need to go back and listen to that one again. I also appreciated the Graham Nichols interview.
I loved that one. That was
Graham's experience where he saw, I believe it was the 7/7 event prior to it happening, just blows my mind.
Yeah.
And then, I'm sorry.
I was going to say it wasn't 7/7. Well, he did, didn't he? You're quite right. He saw 7/7, but he also saw the bombing of the Admiral Duncan pub. in Soho.
That's right. That's right, Anthony. I stand corrected.
It's okay. Just very quickly, I'll just give a background. We'll come back to you on that because that's so extraordinary. I think when we were talking about evidence, I think that is the most powerful evidence I have ever come across for precognition. In that Graham was in an out of the body experience, a spontaneous out of the body experience where he found himself standing on a corner of Old Compton Street and one of the other streets in Soho in central London, standing there and in this out of body state. And then he saw the explosion take place in the Admiral Duncan pub, where about 3 or 4 people were killed, where somebody put a nail bomb into a gay bar. And he saw this. And when he came to, he was surrounded by a number of people. And the first thing he said was, in the next few days, there is going to be a bombing. And he gave the precise location for it. And 5 days later, that bombing took place. And he has signed affidavits for this. So, you cannot argue that that's the law of large numbers. You cannot argue that's a coincidence. That's quite specific and it's important. Sorry, Lehman, I'll go back to you now. So I just wanted to
So yeah, that one definitely stands out. But then also the Amanda Ratcliffe interview, and I'm waiting for the second interview.
Yeah, absolutely. Amanda was fascinating. And I know quite a few people here have referenced Amanda and her work, and we were very keen to get her back. I know that she's had 1 or 2 issues with health and everything, or the health of her boyfriend, but she's very keen to come back and talk to us more because her work is extraordinary. And again, going back to the Arthur Gourdian stuff and the Cathars and reincarnation and everything else, she's fascinated by all that. So Lehman, yeah, that was really good. I notice now again that Paul has his hand up. Paul, would you like to comment?
I was going to say, just obviously all of them are really good, but also Dr. Andrew Gallimore talk about DMT and entities as well, because that's another big fascination in my kind of the people that I talk to as well, as it happens to be one of the things in the brain, which just is just highly fascinating in a realm what it could give you the opportunity to perceive.
Yeah, absolutely. Andrew's work is extraordinary. And again, previous guests of this show, I mean, Andrew, myself, Samantha Lee Treasure, and who else was it? And Steve Merritt. We all spoke at this year's Contact in the Desert event, which took place at Indian Wells in California. And we should have all been physically over there to do our talks, but because of COVID, we didn't make it. But we're hoping that maybe we could all get together there next year. And wouldn't that be a wonderful event? Because there were circumstances whereby I was arranging at the time for people to be traveling across the States to get to that event. Like, for instance, many of you will know about the guys I work with, Engelbert Winkler and Dirk Prokol, the guys who use the Lucid Light device. They were going to be bringing over a Lucid Light device for that event as well. And that would have been extraordinary, I think, had we managed that. And hopefully we'll manage to do that next year, I think. Paul, is your hand still up?
It seems to be. I will lower it down. But no, it's just the way that you get, obviously, the people in and they get so relaxed and bring so much information to the table. I know in the community that come around and talk to myself and come back to yourself as well, as we had in the last few sessions, that they just can't believe how open, where some people could be secretive of knowledge and just stand back and want just seclusion and status for having it, where everybody else is quite happy to come forward and just look, this is what it is. Do you see any connections? Let's go forward with this and then run with it that way rather than just being standoffish. I think it's just fantastic, the work that everyone's doing in this research area.
Yeah, I think it is. I mean, Andrew Gallimore, again, he's an incredibly intelligent guy, and get hold of his book if you alien something theory, I think it's called. And what's good
the
about
Dreaming
that,
Jaguars are basically in contact with him and things like that, so it's good. I haven't had the opportunity to read it because, as you got and everybody else has got, I've got towers of books that I need to get through.
I think what's good about that book is that it's the way it's written, not only the way it's written, but the way it's illustrated. I mean, the illustrations in there are extraordinary. And of course, Andrew lives in Okinawa in Japan. And again, I think he was one of the guests with the event I did with Steve Merrer. I'm not sure if we actually got him in the end, but with the Steve Merrer event, for instance, we had involved in that 35 people from across the world, including one of my favorite guests of this show. Well, there are two of my favorite guests, I think. It'd be interesting to talk about both of them if you haven't seen the shows. It's very much Dr. Arthur Funkhauser, one of the world's leading authorities, if not the world's leading authority in deja vu experience, which was really, really interesting, I think, in terms of that. And so many other people have been involved. But the great Myron Dial, which we were hoping that Myron would involve himself in the event we did a couple of days ago. And I think it would be wonderful at some stage to get Myron involved in this as well, because Myron is somebody who has experienced all of the things that I discuss in my books. And again, the tale, that when Myron first contacted me, it wasn't Myron that contacted me, it was Charon, who was his daemon. And I got communication from Myron Dial's daemon. And it said, this is going to be the most extraordinary email you're going to ever receive, because I am a daemon and I'm telling you that you're quite right about your hypothesis and theory. And to get something like that, a message out the blue from somebody, was just extraordinary. And you realize that you really are on the route. Marty, your hand is up.
Yeah, first of all, I just want to re-emphasize what an amazing name Art Funkhauser is. And I've enjoyed being Facebook friends with him for many years. It's actually
Can I jump in there quickly? There's another guest that's been on the show in the past is Dr. Alan Roberts. And Alan's a fellow Merseysider, and Alan has the kind of typical sense of humour of the people from my part of the country. And he genuinely believes I make all these names up. He said, I cannot believe that's a real person. You're making it up. But going back, Marty.
Yeah, you can't just make up names, Anthony. Yeah, kind of keeping with this theme, actually, I just suddenly remembered, I wanted to ask, do you still have any contact with, who was it Jake Horsley, the guy that wrote that Matrix book? And then also, whatever happened to Alex Shane?
Can you describe that meeting that we had?
This strange myriad of characters that was always the case. It was the same day I was actually going to meet Susan, who was responsible for getting you out presented in front of the New York
By the way, just to dip in there, if anybody's interested, Marty was my master of ceremonies when I did a huge event in the Roosevelt Hotel in New York, where we had around about 300 people there. And Marty was the warm-up act, as it were, which was really good, which again was financed completely and utterly, including food for 300 people, by a wonderful lady called Susan Marie Kovalinsky, who was very heavily involved in our work in the past. I just say thank you to Susan for that. But bouncing back to you, Marty, to our weird meeting in London.
Yeah, I think, by the way, I think warm-up act is a generous definition, but we'll go along with that for now. That's fine. So it was the day, actually, I was going to be meeting up with Susan later on, and meeting her and saying hi for the first time. But I said, yeah, I'll be in London with Anthony. So Jake Horsley, I'm sure Anthony will do a better job elaborating on this, but he'd written a book about the Matrix, right? He had a lot of wealth from his family, and he basically just got rid of all of his money and decided he was the one and was going to go travel around the world. I'm probably absolutely butchering that, so I'm sure Anthony will correct that. But I had a meeting with Anthony, him, and then a guy called Alex Shane, who was the British wrestling champion at the time. He had defeated, you might remember Mick Foley, like he was known as Cactus Jack, one of the biggest wrestlers. He'd actually beaten him in a fight. And Alex Shane was a very charismatic kind of sort of Russell Brand type character, very loud and confident, very androgynous, you could say. But yeah, I had a very strange eclectic meeting with Anthony, Jake, and Alex, and their names just popped into my head, Anthony. I was wondering if you ever still speak to Jake. And you might want to clarify Jake's background, because I think I might have just butchered that slightly there, so you probably know better than I do.
Yeah, it was an extraordinary meeting. Again, one of the wonderful things that's been me over the last 2 decades is that every day I will be contacted by somebody. Literally every day of my life for the last 10 years, there's been at least one person who's contacted, sometimes half a dozen, who have read my work and have been interested in what I've been writing. particularly with Alex Shane, because Alex contacted me and he travelled up to Merseyside. And again, Laura's going to find this interesting. Is we arranged to meet in before I knew a lot of the guys that Laura knows. We arranged to meet in the Bridge Inn in Port Sunlight, and he travelled up from nowhere down from London and just travelled up for the day. And he walked into the pub, and he is physically the largest human being I've ever seen. You know, he's about 6'8", and he's just big, but muscular. But he's such a sensitive, quietly spoken individual that you wouldn't believe. But I'll guarantee if you go onto YouTube and you look up Alex Shane, he comes across as being incredibly aggressive and he's going to kill people, he's going to tear their heads off. But he is so cerebral and he's such a deep thinker. And funnily enough, I'm probably one of the few writers of my ilk that's had an article about him in Wrestlers Monthly, where Alex actually wrote, you know, there are all these articles about how you tear people's heads off, and there's all these wrestlers, professional wrestlers in it. And then there's a picture of little me talking about cheating the ferryman. And the people reading the magazine must have been thinking, this is just weird beyond words. But we arranged to go down to London to meet Alex, and Martin came down with me as well. But also we met up with Jake Horsley. And Jake Horsley is a fascinating guy. He wrote this amazing book called Matrix Warrior Being the One. And the book blew my mind, and I contacted him. And again, we became really good friends. And Jake is an interesting character in that I think I'm right in saying that his father set up Northern Foods, and he inherited, when his father died when he was about 19 or 20, he inherited an awful lot of money. And he went on this 2 or 3 year bender and then started coming out of it and became a writer and became an incredibly deep thinker, you know, and he writes about movies. He's like you, Martin. He knows so much about movies. But he also writes under the pseudonym of Aeolus Kephas. And the books there are about magic and Enochian magic and black magic. And also, like me, he's fascinated by Philip K. Dick and the way in which Philip K. Dick's logic works. And again, he's somebody that we must get, sir, as a future guest on here, because he would be electric. I mean, he's such an interesting personality, but very different to Alex. So there's Martin and myself and Alex, and we're sitting outside this, was it called the World's End, the pub, Marty?
That does sound about right.
Okay, in Soho, just round the corner, funnily enough, from where the events took place with Graham Nichols. And do you remember that was there was the guy selling the CDs?
Yes.
He came along, and I bought one of his CDs off him.
Yes, I do remember that, actually.
Because I think he then brought out an album called The Damon and the Eidolon. I think it was that guy. Because he then got into my work.
Yeah, consistencies or anything to go by wouldn't surprise me, yeah.
Absolutely. So there are so many people that we really need to get involved in this show. And next year could be a really good year for that, I think. Right. Anybody else want to make a comment on your favourite edition this year, or the one that you enjoyed the most, or the one you didn't enjoy?
I really enjoyed the Daniel Abella one about Philip K. Dick and the idea of creativity and the imaginal influencing the future. I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, I had a very interesting, Daniel interviewed me for his podcast as well in New York. And I found his ideas very intriguing, very fascinating. And of course, we have got this theme of Philip K. Dick and his work going all the way through our writings here, and the themes that we've followed here. Now, sadly, and this is rather sad, is that one of the that Steve Merrer and I had agreed that we would do a show on each of my books when we did the recordings in Manchester, and one of them was going to be one on the Philip K. Dick book, which was very sad because I'd lined up 3 or 4 really interesting characters, including Philip K. Dick's final wife, Tessa. Also William Sarrell, who was also a guest on our show last year, I think. But also the guy who discovered Philip K. Dick when he had his stroke. Now, again, this gives it just a little bit of a side to this, because this I still think is one of the most extraordinary stories I've ever come across. And forgive me if you guys have heard it, but it's worth repeating. And I think I'm the only writer well, I know I'm the only writer that's picked up on this. But Philip K. Dick, in the final 6 or 7 months of his life, was living on his own in Los Angeles, and he was a member of a book club. And every Tuesday night, he'd attend the book club, and they'd discuss books and everything else as well. But one particular evening, he didn't turn up. So the next day, a group of his friends went round to his house. Now, roll back a time. Roll back. I jumped in there too quickly, actually. Let's just roll back. Philip K. Dick, thanks to a guy called Nick Buchanan, who again has been on this show, who's an absolute expert on Philip K. Dick. And he's the editor of PKD Otaku, which is a Philip K. Dick fanzine. And when I was doing my research for the Philip K. Dick book, Nick loaned me the priceless volumes of the Philip K. Dick letters. So all the letters Philip K. Dick wrote were actually binded into 4 or 5 volumes of letters in chronological order. And in the research for the book, I read through these. But one of the things that I discovered when I was doing my research was some of the letters weren't in there. And quite by chance, as synchronicity happens, I came across on the web somebody selling some letters that Philip K. Dick had written to them. And the lady was a lady called Gloria Krentz Bush. And she was a pen pal of Philip K. Dick in the early 1970s. And I managed to get hold of a copy of one of these letters. And it's extraordinary. And what I'll do is I'll post a picture of this on Facebook, because I've posted it before. But if you've not heard this before, this will blow your mind. In the letter, he turns round and he's typed it. And he types it. And he's typing to Gloria about little chit chat. And then suddenly there's a handwritten bit at the bottom. And it says, Gloria, I think I'm becoming precognitive. Last night I had a series of powerful hypnagogic images of undersea cities. And then one stark image. A portly middle-aged man lying on his stomach between a sofa and a coffee table. Gloria, I think I'm becoming precognitive. Now, I read this and I knew about it, and I thought, this is interesting. It's an interesting letter, but it's not that well known. I then start researching Philip K. Dick's life, and I discover from a letter or writings of an American science fiction writer who was supposed to be on the show, whose name has escaped me, unfortunately, at the moment. He wrote a book called The Anubis Gate. He's quite famous, and I contacted him before I was doing the show. It'll come to me. Tim Powers. And Tim was a member of this book club. So Tim explains to me, and he explains to in this thing, and he said in one of his articles, and he said that they knocked the door down on the Wednesday morning. They had to break the door down to get into Phil's house because they couldn't get in. And they got into the room and they found him lying between a sofa and a coffee table, flat on his stomach. Now, I'm the only person that's noticed this, and I thought when I put this in the book that, this is going to make the book a bestseller. Everybody's going to be wanting to know about this. But the only people that have ever featured that discovery, I featured in a French and German TV program on Philip K. Dick, which went out on French and German television about 5 years ago. I went over to Paris and I was interviewed over there. And I was interviewed there. I mean, Rutger Hauer was interviewed for it, and myself, and Teresa Dick and various other people. But it's extraordinary. It proves that he saw his own future. And again, it was something that Lehman was saying earlier on before, was this extraordinary idea that you can see your own future. Now, again, I'll jump in very quickly here. And then, because I know Danny wants to speak, and I'll just finish this off, because I also discovered that Philip K. Dick in his letters described how when he was a young boy, he used to wake up in the middle of the night in a state of what we would call sleep paralysis. And he would see an older man standing at the end of his bed. And then when he gets older, he gets into his 40s and he starts to have these vivid dreams. And he finds himself back in the bedroom when he was a child, looking at himself lying in bed. And he turns around and he says, that figure was me. The figure at the end of my bed was me that I saw as a young child, looking back in my own past. Now that is extraordinary. And that's why I called the book Philip K. Dick, A Life of Philip K. Dick, the Man Who Remembered the Future. because he remembered the future. Danny, you wanted to speak?
Yes, it was to come in on what you were saying, fascinating, and to tie it up with the things that Sarah's going to do. I know you're all aware of John Donne's work. Is it Donne? No, Experiment with Time.
John William Donne.
Yeah, yeah.
An Experiment
So,
with Time, yeah.
if you kind of extrapolate that and compare people reporting their dreams and then 6 months later experiencing what they had, I've met and I've had it myself when I experience remembering all the dreams I've ever had. Yeah. So it's almost like a parallel play. It's almost too much to contain. You have like the normal consensual reality, and then you can remember one dream, but then you can remember all the dreams, and that's almost like a parallel life that you're living, except when you're asleep. Okay. Now, I think I don't want to bring in things like astral body, but I can bring that in as a timeless state. And there's the Indian name for that, the long body that you're aware of.
Yeah,
exactly. So there seems to be a mechanism there. So if he's remembering his future or being precognitive, rather than looking into the future, he could be remembering or accessing the dream. Or if you bring in, simultaneous nature of time, but the fact that we can only process it in terms of segments of our age and what's around us. I don't see very many people tying this together.
If you have read my book, The Labyrinth of Time, this is exactly what I do. And in fact, I take the work of John William Donne and his experiment with time, and more importantly, his book, the Serial Universe. And he argues that there are levels of time, and he has this concept of serial time. And what's fascinating here is to how he logically gets to that conclusion. And it's very clever. He turns around and he says, imagine that time flows. But if time flows, how do we know it's flowing? In other words, we know that a river flows because we have riverbanks, and when the river flows back, we see the riverbanks, and that's our reference point that time is flowing. But there are no reference points for time in the same way. So he argued, in order for there to be a reference point for time flow, there has to be another form of time that is measured against that time, and he called that time 2. And then he argued, and this is where it gets to my Damon Edelon stuff, he argued that in time 2, there is an observer 2 as well. So there's an observer 1 in this time, and there's a version of you that exists in the time outside of this time, which allows you to have the idea of temporal flow. And this is how he argues how precognition works, because effectively what happens is you share the mentality of your time 2 person, which is in time 2. Now, on top of this, and I was delighted you brought in the concept of the linga surya, or the long body, because this is what I argue. And again, I take the work of people like Peter Ouspensky in terms of this, and also a guy called I can't think of his name now. He was a disciple of Ouspensky, and he has the idea that we are all one long creature through all our lives, and we are like, each one of us at any point in time is a slice of this long body. Now, again, if you get the chance, and it's one of my books that is the less seller of my books, is the book I wrote on J.B. Priestley. And
great.
Yeah.
No, I can stop you. I've been trying to think of that name. I met his grandson. I think you know his grandson.
Luke.
We talk, and he made a big point of saying that we should talk. He made a big point when we had a drink, saying, "Oh, you should talk."
That's why I put my hand up, the JB Priestley thing I was about to say about that exact thing. Because we went and saw that play, didn't we? I've Been Here Before. It wasn't Time in the Conways, was it?
We went to see. Was that the one? Did you came along? Didn't you, when I spoke at the National Theatre?
No, I came and saw a play with you. I don't think I was able to sit with you, but I think it was the one that I've Been Here Before.
It was I Have Been Here Before. Yes, yeah. We saw that in the German Theatre in Jermyn Street in near Oxford Street. because in that, again, you know, the themes in there are quite extraordinary. I mean, J.B. Priestley was way up in front of his time. And I think that's one of the books I'm very proud of. And it's sad that it's one of my lesser sellers, and it's never really sold very well because it's too precise in its terminology. But Luke Dodgson, who who you're referencing there, Luke ordinarily would have hopefully been involved in here if he'd have known about it sooner. And Luke is a regular listener in, and he's been a guest on this show as well. And he's J.B. Priestley's great grandson.
Yeah.
But Priestley talked about this long body, and in his play Time and the Conways, he makes a precise reference to the long body. And at the end of Act 2 of Time and the Conways, a guy called Alan, who's one of the Conways siblings, gives a speech to his sister Kay, and he explains this. And he said, and what's interesting, you'll love this, what he turns around and he says is, at the end of this speech, he said, there's a book that you need to read. I'll lend it to you and you can read it on the train. And the book he's referencing is actually J.W. Dunn's book, An Experiment with Time. He never actually says it, but that's the book that Alan is referencing there. Now, whereas with Marty's point, the play he's talking about, I Have Been Here Before, is an Itladian play. It is completely Itlad. It is a character who lives his life again. And when he's living his life again, he goes into the things that happened in the life where people made mistakes. And he gets himself in a location. And in this case, it's a young couple that are going to make a terrible mistake in a hotel in the Yorkshire Moors in about 1937. And this guy, Dr. Gortler, he's living his life again, and he makes sure he's at the hotel to meet the couple to stop them making the mistake they did last time. It's an extraordinary play and well worth watching, I think. Well worth watching, which is really good. And there was something else you said there that I thought that's an interesting point as well, but I've lost it.
No, it's I don't know if it adds something to it, but this thing about the eternal return, or even serial reincarnation in the same body, like Will Self's book. When you've read Will Self's book, when someone dies and gets reborn down the street, are you aware of that one?
No, I'm not. I know of Will Self, but
so, yeah, that's interesting. There's this thing about even the model of one's individuality bears question. So Jack London with that book when someone's imprisoned and he's in a straitjacket and he travels. Have you read that book?
No.
I know the film that you're talking about. It's Adrian Brody. It's called The
Star Traveller or Starbound.
That's it. Yeah, the book's really excellent considering when it was written many moons ago. So that's exactly. If you haven't read it, you'll find it fascinating because it's a bit like what's the butterfly thing in French called? A papillon. It's a bit like Papillon in some ways.
Oh, right.
But he experiences other lives by being tortured. But,
yes.
There's a stressor to the body. You can say it's, and then dimethyltryptamine or a variant being released. But somehow, by torture induction, he's withdrawn from the pain and he's traveled. That's interesting. So, when people say that they've experienced a past life or even someone else's life, Stan Groff's work was interested in this area when people had experiences of other cultures that they'd never experienced. A Japanese, a Methodist experiencing the life of a Shinto Buddhist, for instance, and recalling all the details is really interesting. And then it begs the question of what a group mind is. I understand the theory of the individual, and that begs what's an individual really in some ways. But when you've spoken about egregores, but the whole group mind effect anyway in a group, if we sat down to speak and we made a vow not to say anything until it really bubbled up inside us, I bet 2 or 3 of us would have the same thought bubbling to come up. I'm sure you know what I mean.
No, I do. I mean, it's very much the idea of we are all one consciousness experiencing itself subjectively. the famous Bill Hicks monologue. And of course, one of the things that's central to my writing, my cheating the ferryman hypothesis, is effectively all the things you've been discussing now, and more, because I'm reminded, for instance, of the famous story, an incident at Owl Bridge, I think it is, Ambrose Bierce, where the guy lives his whole lifetime, or he lives a lot of his life the moment before he's hung. There is a very famous well, it's famous, I don't know, but a short story by Jorge Borges called The Little Miracle, where again somebody's in front of a firing squad, and in the final seconds of his life he lives his whole life again and again and again. And again, this is absolutely the central point of my writings. The cheating the ferryman hypothesis is absolutely central. This is why the writings of people like Ouspensky, the writings of J.B. Priestley, this is why they fascinate me so much. And as Marty will know, we've been discussing these concepts, and Laura as well, we've been discussing these concepts for decades now. This is nothing new to the Atlanteans, the people that have been involved in my work for the long term. There's nothing new. We spend all our time going, oh, now somebody else has written a book on it. And, I think the classic book on this, by the way, is Replay, which was written in the 1980s, I think, Ken Grinwood. And that is the ultimate book for this. But The Time Traveler's Wife, Audrey Niffiger, again, somebody I've been in contact with, is the same. You then have it in reverse with the Strange Life of Benjamin Button, the novel, and of course the film. So these are themes and tropes. And of course the film, I think, Marty, you introduced me to, didn't you? Triangle.
Oh yeah, I think we never actually ended up talking about it when I was on your show last year. We introed into it, and then we just quickly went off on a tangent, as is often the way. But yeah, that's a very, very complicated movie with a lot going on, to the point that you have a lot of these videos made explaining, but it's exceptionally Atlantean in theme. And every day I see references and like watch random little gems of movies I keep meaning to send across to you. Go, oh, you need to see this, you need to see this. There was one a couple of months ago. It wasn't necessarily, it was a lot better than I thought it was going to be, actually. It was an action movie, quite a recent one. I think it was called Boss Level, but it was the concept of life being like a computer game, and basically this guy's continuously getting killed within 10 seconds of being woken up in brutal ways, and he has to get like 2 hours in to save his wife through repeatedly learning, getting it wrong, trial and error, over and over and over and over again. And it was actually a lot better than I thought. But just quickly, I had a call on Saturday. I'm still dating. I got talking to this girl, and we experienced probably a good 10-15 minutes of continuous like similarities and coincidences, to the point that it was getting scary. And then she told me about, I actually said about your work, and she said she's very good friends with a guy called William Bridges, who wrote that episode of Black Mirror, the one where they're all on like the starship with the main guy who looked, everyone thought the main guy was Matt Damon, but it wasn't Matt Damon, it was just his twin. But he wrote that and won a BAFTA or an Emmy or something for it anyway. But yeah, he's written a lot of other, he wrote Soulmates, which was on,
I liked Soulmates. I thought that was good.
yeah, he wrote that as well, and I was like, wow, that's some good company you're keeping. But yeah, there's so many of these things that are popping up, and every day I'm like, oh, I must forward that to you. That was a really great one. Just I'll make this the last point. But yeah, there was a film I saw on because it's relevant to this. It was on Prime the other day. I think it was called Love and Time Travel, but it's got a different name as well. It's an Australian movie, and very similar to what we've been describing. It's a guy who is giving himself clues from the future, and it's almost like he's seeing his future and past back and forth, and him and all these other characters are intertwined, and they solve like a a few mysteries and things going on. But yeah, there's so many of these now. I know Source Code is still a point of contention for you.
It certainly is.
Watched it
Well,
but
can I say,
Yeah, I'm done anyway.
Can I say something?
Yeah.
I actually think your book, The Labyrinth of Time, is the best book ever written on time. Ever. I mean, I think about it. I've read it like 5 times, and I think about different things that you've written in that book because you pulled it all together. And every time something happens that's strange to do, I can go back to your book and turn to a page. But I really do. I think you pulled it all together in that book. It's my absolute favorite book of my entire life.
Well, funnily enough, if people ask me what my favourite book of my own books are, I'd agree with you. The Labyrinth of Time is my personal favourite book. I put so much into that, and I put so much of myself into it, and I put so much of my interest in literature and poetry and music into that, because people who don't know me tend to assume that I'm very focused just in the areas of extraordinary human experiences. But I'm much more broader in my interests, because many people aren't aware of the fact that I was going to be doing my PhD in Renaissance art and the paintings of Piero della Francesca. So technically my area of expertise is actually Renaissance painting, as well as history, rather than the subjects I write about. And I've always loved literature, and in that book, it had the opportunity to analyze in great depth some of the great novels that discuss about time, and I'm particularly thinking of things like Finnegan's Wake, James Joyce. And
I was
again,
going to mention I read Ancient Evenings by Norman Mailer, and that's a really good Eladian themed book.
Do you know,
also, what Danny was mentioning earlier, I really started to think about the OA. I thought that was a great series that explored those kind of ideas of out-of-body experiences and alternate realities and life beyond death. I thought that was a really interesting TV show.
Well, we know a member of our group, Natalie Duggan. Natalie is one of the most vocal people about.
I love her.
Natalie is amazing. But again, interestingly enough, with the OA, I'm not sure if I've mentioned this in an interview, but there is a friend of mine on Facebook, and I think we've met up a couple of times. I'm not sure. But he is also a part-time actor, and he acted on the OA with the writer. I can't remember her name, the blonde girl. It's got a Swedish name. Can anybody remember the main actress in it? Okay, doesn't matter. But anyway, he took the opportunity one day when she was having coffee. No, that's right. He mentioned something to her, but she didn't take it. And then he bumped into her in the street a few weeks later, and they had a conversation about my work. And she seemed to be quite intrigued about it. But then again, that's what you're going to do, aren't you? If you're quite a famous actress and somebody stops you in the street and says there's this obscure English guy who writes books that are very similar to what you're talking about, you're just going to humor him. But nevertheless, he said that she was very interested in the implications, because I started watching the OA and I thought it was a very intriguing idea. And they didn't get the 3rd series, did they? Again, a tragic waste.
I think the contemporary dance moves put a lot of people off right at the end there, whereas I quite liked that bit.
What was that? What?
They had to do some dance moves to enter the portal into another life.
Oh, right. So that's very...
Tai Chi combo.
It was, what was it like? It was like, oh God, what's his name?
Gurdjieff.
Not me, but...
Gurdjieff,
that's it. Yeah. It was Gurdjieff kind of dance stuff.
That's what I thought. As soon as I said it, she's bringing in Gurdjieffian imageries here. And of course, then we have another link here with Itlad, because of course, Gurdjieff and Ouspensky worked very closely together for many, many years. And of course, Gurdjieff was a very interesting character, a Georgian Greek eccentric who had a massive following in the 1930s. And he was in Fontainebleau, I think, in France, and he had a huge house there. And I think his reputation was destroyed when it was Catherine Mansfield, the writer, who he told to go and swim in the water in the cold, and she came down with pneumonia and died or something. But his argument wasn't it? Dance movements, which is very Sufi, isn't it? The kind of the use of dance movements. So she was being very clever there, the writer of the OA, to apply something like that to it. Very interesting.
It's interesting. I was in the Soviet Union for a while, and I was watching the original Solaris film.
Ah, Tarkovsky.
Yeah. and they still had the remnants of people that had been to Armenia initially, for the initial Gurdjieffian wave before he came to Europe.
Right.
That trail that he said he did. And
Meetings
I enjoyed.
It was meetings with extraordinary men, wasn't it?
It was, yeah. It's there's a lot of interesting things in the ex-Soviet republics. A lot of things they explored that might come out later on in the fullness of time. But there was a book that was recommended to me that I don't hear referenced. It's an Asimov book on time. Have you come across that book?
I don't think so. I haven't read. I read I, Robot, but that's it. I haven't read any other.
Yeah, it's really interesting that this book never gets a recommendation anywhere. It's called The End of Eternity, and I don't know anyone that's read it. And you'll find, if you read it, I think you'll find it interesting. Because
this is an opportunity here. Just jumping in. Sorry, I'm just jumping in because Sarah and I have been debating. Well, we were planning to start a book club based upon this group, and one of the books we were going to start with was Last and First Men by Olaf Stapleton as a starting
book.
Star Maker, sorry.
Oh, John as well is good. Yeah.
But your book there sounds like an interesting one. That maybe that could be an interesting one to maybe launch it with.
It's really interesting because you can imagine how a time traveler could change time. It just came on my radar when I was thinking about those things about, your example of someone going in time and then informing someone about something else. And why wouldn't there be a memory? It's a bit of a spoiler I'm giving here. Why I won't say what happens, but it's so well thought out, and when a book appears that answers your questions, just the model was so elegant. And as I said, people have read a lot of Asimov stuff, but they haven't read that one. And it's maybe like your book when you said it's a very clean, small volume that can be read very quickly. It can be overlooked, actually. It can be overlooked because of the theories on time that are there.
I think
as an agent in time, please.
I think sometimes books are so far ahead of their time. I've used this analogy many times with my own writing, in my own vague vanity, I suppose. But the idea that I feel I'm so far ahead of the curve, people can't see me because I'm already so far ahead. And then when people come behind me with their ideas, people go, wow, isn't that original? Whereas nobody's actually realised I've already got the brownie point and everybody's forgotten about it. And I think there's an awful lot of writers like that really, or even famous writers who do something very experimental, which is completely missed by the mainstream. And in many ways, that's the thing they were interested in. That's what they really wanted to do. And for instance, Sarah and I, we did one of the shows we did this year, which was really enjoyable. And it was unfortunate that our friend Emma couldn't join us today, Emma O'Neill, Emma McCann. We did a wonderful show on Lewis Carroll.
Yes, of course.
And you were involved in that, of course, weren't you?
Well, obviously, June Lourney is my mother-in-law.
Of course, and you facilitated. And can you tell us about that show, because you facilitated that, you made that happen, you were responsible for that.
Well, I'll just start by saying this is another synchronicity, or sync as we call it. My husband's mother is, and I always want to use the word president, but she's really just been involved with the Lewis Carroll Society for so long. She's just, everyone knows her that is involved with Alice in Wonderland. And it takes place, they meet, where is the city they meet, Anthony?
What
is the name of that?
Is it Chester? No, Warrington. No. Warrington.
And they meet, and they've been meeting.
No, Daresbury, more accurately.
Daresbury, that's right. And they meet. It's a whole group of people in the Lewis Carroll Society, and they all meet. And she actually illustrated a book for the Lewis Carroll Society, and then she is an artist as well. And she did a show at her gallery with all this Alice in Wonderland stuff. And it turns out, if I remember, you and Samantha Treasure were going to try and put together a whole Alice in Wonderland like expedition type thing,
And
like when you
Sarah,
went to the
and Sarah
caves.
as well.
And Sarah, right? Okay. And so at that point, I sent you all the information that I had that from June Lorney, that she had done, and everything that she knew about Lewis Carroll, because she knew the history of his life and the book and all this kind of stuff. And then you and Sarah and Samantha Treasure all did an interview with her on, which was, you know, what you do every Monday, the chat. And so that was just another synchronicity, because you were already involved, and of course a lot of stuff to do with time, if you stop and think about Alice in Wonderland. But so that all came together, and then you had that wonderful interview that you guys did.
Well, it was actually Sarah who originally. Do you remember, Sarah, when we met up? You, Sam, and I met up, and it was in London. That day, you were talking about the hieroglyphics, and that's when we decided that we could try and do something, because it coincided, didn't it, with some big event they were doing at the V&A?
Oh, that's right. Yeah, they had a big Alice exhibition, and we were trying to. It was kind of around the time that lockdown and everything started happening, so it never really happened. But I do think for a lot of people, these themes appear in early childhood, and for me, I think that I got really into dreaming because I think children, for one thing, are generally better dreamers, and I was always into Alice in Wonderland, and then those themes kind of just got reinforced over and over again to be the things that I was interested in. And when I come back to it, you know, you realize how much you actually take in from media, film, books. All of these things kind of weave into the person that we end up becoming. Like just recently, talking about like TV shows that you watch again, I've been watching Seinfeld. It's really sort of refreshing and politically incorrect.
Very true. Very
I
true.
love it. And I realize how many jokes I've got, even things like there's an episode where they go, "Oh, hello," and I realized I did that for ages, and I didn't realize it had come from Seinfeld at all. And then there's another there's like other bits and pieces that they do in it where I thought it was like a joke that I'd made up, but actually it was from Seinfeld.
Well, funnily enough, as a nice bit of synchronicity here as well, we were discussing Luke Dodgson earlier on, being J.B. Priestley's great-grandson. When I last met Luke, we were discussing various other links, and I discovered that the name Dodgson is actually the same family as the Reverend Dodgson, of course, who was Lewis Carroll. So
that's right.
We have a mutual.
There was also Guildford is
related
connected with Lewis Carroll as well, with good old Alice in Wonderland. There's loads of statues down there.
Well, sorry, Paul. What was that?
In Guildford, Lewis Carroll is connected with obviously doing Alice in Wonderland, because they got lots of statues down there, because he was down there writing parts of it at the time. I was just going to put three things quickly in, obviously, that have gone past in conversation. Your long body bit, if you go back to Johnny Darko and the water kind of fluid that was going through, that's another connection.
Yeah.
And also a film, if you really want to see that was ahead of its time, was 1991, Final Approach, all about a Blackbird test pilot and how he ends up in connections. I won't give anything away, but there is so much, and it made such an impact on me that for years I've been trying to find it, finally found it. And all the stuff that I've been reading 20 years later, it was almost encoded within the whole of that film. And it was just bananas, because like you were saying, you're ahead of the curve on things. It was already in there. And you just look at it and go, either this person couldn't express it in a way of a technical paper, but they could express it through art form. And there's just highly dense packed information that I feel is in there. And again, I feel that with a lot of artists. And then something someone sent to me today, and I got to obviously research this, was the connection. They think that Jesus got his connection to God when he got the baptism by water, when John the Baptist pushed him under. So now, is that going back to the torture routine of where you've got the straitjacket and doing all this, and then you're releasing DMT, and there's all these connections which you've got to be researched and checked to see if they're real, but it's a fascinating thread to go onto. And unfortunately, I couldn't jump in with all these three different threads and put them into what's just gone past.
Well, I'm delighted you brought in Final Approach here. Marty, was it you that suggested I watch Final Approach?
No, I don't think it was.
That would have been
In
me.
that case, I think it was Alex Shane, because I know somebody who, in the end, sent me a copy of Final Approach, and I watched it, and I totally agree with you, Paul. It's the most extraordinary film. It's filmed in this really strange way. It's acted in a very strange way, and it's almost wooden in its acting, but it's deliberately wooden, and it seems to all take place in this single set. Very, very strange, very powerful. I strongly advise anybody to check out Final Approach. But I'd argue here that all of this is part of the zeitgeist, isn't it? It's part of the way in which ideas come about when the time is right. And the time is right now for a lot of these things, because suddenly we're in a position now where we have virtual reality. We are now in a position where we can put on a VR headset and we can take ourselves into a reality that is almost like this reality. And I think that is incredibly powerful for us. And I'm just hoping that our little group will be hit on that, and maybe people will start picking up. These are the guys that are doing this and are discussing it in a very precise way. By the way, I'd like to say hi to Venatus Pinto. Would you like to just say hi? Okay. Well, oh, yeah.
Hello.
Hi. Where are you coming from?
I'm in New York, and the thing that I wanted to point out was that in issue 146 of Philosophy Now, and the cover illustration is on Alice falling down the hole, and the issue is on what's really real. And the thing is that I have a piece in it on Plato's Modern Cave, and it's called Get Real.
Venetius, you have to tell him that you're an artist and all the bits and pieces about you, because you've just got work everywhere. I know Venetius from a few years back.
Well, this is extraordinary. So you've written a piece on Plato's
No.
Cave.
I've just illustrated a piece on Plato's Modern Cave.
Wow. The reason this is intriguing is
I can show it to you if you guys were to turn it to me. I mean, turn the camera. I mean, let me show you something.
Yeah, no, please.
Okay.
Wow. Okay. It would be good if you could.
And there you have, I often use things like petroglyphs and stuff like that, like on specific pieces. And this is the what do you call it? Picasso's bull from Guernica.
Wow. Well,
Venetius has got a wide range of work and knows a lot about philosophy as well, and it's always worthwhile to go and see all of his bits and pieces. No, I mean, you just are a credit to all
you guys are fascinating. I'm just kind of zap.
Well, thank you for that. For the reason is because I'm sure that Sarah and I are both jumping up and down at this, because we're planning to recreate Plato's Cave in Greece next year. Okay. And I have found through my research, I found an article written in 1905 in the Harvard Review of Archaeology by a Harvard archaeologist who had researched and found the actual location where Plato placed his allegory of the cave he used in his Mein Kampf. And I am working with my Greek publisher, because I've got a couple of books that have come out recently in Greek, and I have a Greek publisher based in Athens. And he and I are working on trying to get the actual cave where we will create Plato's Cave again. Now, what is really interesting here is, and again, this is a link to Paul, and this is how the world works at the moment. Paul introduced me to the Dreaming Jaguars, who are a couple of guys who are brilliant filmmakers, and they do it with the amazing drones where they fly. And one of the guys was involved in working on various BBC TV series. And our plan is that when we do Plato's Cave, what we're hoping is that the Dreaming Jaguars can take a drone and fly it over the centre of Athens, fly it over the Parthenon, then fly it out maybe over to Egina and the small Greek islands nearby, then fly in over Cape Sunion, then come over Sunion, and then fly into the cave. And I'm going to be standing there in the cave wearing my purple robes, and it'll zoom in and I'll say, welcome to Plato's Cave. And what we're going to do is we are planning to take some lucid light devices with us. We did an event, didn't we, Sarah? Maybe, Sarah, you could explain the event we did at Drakelo very quickly as to explain what we did.
We did a kind of multi-sensory Plato's Cave type experience and a disused nuclear bunker. It was an amazing underground network of tunnels that was used as a phantom ammunitions factory by Rolls-Royce during the Second World War. And it was a place where the royal family were apparently going to go in event of a nuclear war and an attack as well. It was really weird. It had very strange energy, I thought, and it was incredible to look through. It was really spooky because there were lots of old-fashioned mechanical office environments. There were hospital beds and things like this set up. And we had Dirk Prockel and Engelbert Winkler, who invented the Lucia Light, giving demonstrations of the Lucia Light. Me and Carl Smith and the group of people that have been working on the Seventh Ray, which is a virtual reality mystery initiation experience. We had some other people going through that in a different room. David Luke was there as well. I'm sure you're all familiar with David Luke, and he's been on the Consciousness Hour before as well. And then Anthony, you and Sam were leading people through the next time when you get capes, try not to get child-sized Smithies. We need like proper fancy robes, like with maybe we need to get hold of some proper Phoenician purple dye as well for the next lot. I think Sam got lost in the complex at one point.
We lost her. We lost her for ages. We were wandering around.
It was I feel like we initiated ourselves more than anyone else in that experience. So yeah, I think really just being in this really strange underground environment that was like a labyrinth, really. It was massive. I think it was a bit of a Milton Keynes down there, because I think it did have a grid layout, but it was pretty terrifying. I can't imagine how Sam must have felt, because she was left on her own in there for ages and it was pretty cold, and didn't really know where she was. And then she got lost. She was lost for a small period of time. So that was a bit scary, but we made it out. I think the cheap hotel we stayed in might have been even more terrifying.
Bates Motel.
Hotel was hilarious. Our friend booked that hotel, and there was a blood stain on my bed when I went in. Literally every single thing in the room was broken. And when I was laying in bed at night, the first night, I heard this like scurrying, and I convinced myself that someone upstairs must have a very small dog. And then I realized it was obviously a rat that was like scurrying across the ceiling. And I think the main reason for the booking was that it had a 24-hour bar, which, as I don't drink, didn't interest me very much, but there wasn't much else to recommend the hotel. I loved it because I like that sort of thing, but it was really funny.
I think everybody that was involved in that bonded after that. It was like Lost. It was like Lost. As if we crashed.
That would have made a great sitcom. That whole event would have made my plan is I want to write a Netflix series that's like a paranormal themed sitcom, but there's real phenomena going on, but the characters and the silly situations they get into are lols.
Well, we could have done that, and I think it was very interesting how we did it as well, because it was me that decided that we could then apply Plato's Cave to this. So we had a group of volunteers who had paid to be involved in the event, and they had initially been put into vague altered states of consciousness by your thing, the ninth wave. Was it the ninth wave or the seventh? The ninth?
Seventh ray.
It's the seventh, okay. And they'd also been involved with the Lucia Light device, so they were already in a kind of a weird state. And then I turn up with my purple robes, but it was one of the organisers that got the purple robes for Sam and I.
Oh, okay, that's right.
It wasn't us. It wasn't us.
They were like, those small fancy dress costumes.
Yeah. It didn't have that effect.
They were like child size.
They were. We looked weird, didn't we? But I turn up in the purple robes, and then what happened was, the plan was that I was the Lord of the Ceremonies, because we were repeating the Eleusinian mysteries and the idea of the initiation and the road to Lucius and everything else as well. And Sam was playing the role of Persephone, and that's why she got lost, because she had to wander off into there, because I was leading the people into the darkness, because these tunnels are extraordinary. They run for miles, and they're dead straight, and they're completely dark, and they're eerie. So there I am explaining to everybody about the weirdness and the initiation ceremonies and everything in character. And then suddenly Sam appears from one of the angled corridors, walking towards us as if she's in a trance. And she announces that she's Persephone, that she's been abducted by Hades, that she's been trying to find her way back using the pomegranate seeds. And by that time, I think the people involved were going, oh my God, this is absolutely terrifying. And then we take them in, and then we literally recreated Plato's cave. We had a back wall, we had big lights, and then we had cardboard cutouts. And a lot of people all night have been making these cardboard cutouts of animals. And then they just did them like Plato's cave and reflected them against the back wall. But we feel that, you know, we could do something even more extraordinary if we could do it in Greece and do it this way. And there's a lot of people that are quite interested in this. If we could, it would be extraordinary. So watch this space on this one, because this could be an incredible event. And now that my books are out in Greek, or two of my books are out in Greek, we already have a direct line. And there is a mutual friend, isn't there, Sarah, of ours, Lena?
Yeah,
And Lena's family knows my publisher's family. So we're hopeful that Lena and Carl can be involved in it as well. So we could do something really quite something. So that's really good. Right. Any other comments? Anybody else want to join in with anything?
Yes, I have experienced the Lucia Light myself in September of 2017 in Florida. And for months after that, I experienced a uptick in strange experiences. And I was just wondering if anybody else who has sat with the Lucia Light has had an uptick of like incredibly strange experiences.
Well, when I first, can I just jump in first, and then can jump in here? I was first introduced to Lucia through a future guest of this show, by the way, a lady called Evelyn Elassa. And Evelyn is a Swiss person who writes on near-death experiences. She's quite famous in her world. She's written books with people like Kenneth Ring. And Evelyn and I met at a Scientific and Medical Network meeting where Evelyn was giving a talk on near-death experiences. And she invited me over to stay at her place in Geneva. And she said, I want you to come over, but I'd like you to introduce you to two friends of mine who have invented this light machine, which they call the hypnagogic light device, or the Lucia. Dr. Winkler and Dr. Procol. Now, Winkler is a consultant psychologist and Procol is a consultant neurologist. So these guys are serious researchers. They haven't just cobbled it together. You know, they built it from scratch based upon neurology and how the brain works. And Engelbert had read my first book, and because Engelbert had had a near-death experience when he was a youngster, he found my book fascinating. My first book is The Life After Death. And they brought this machine over. They live in the Tyrol in Austria, just across the border. And they brought this machine in and they wanted to test it out on me. Now, again, if anybody's interested, if you want to go onto my YouTube channel, there's a short film of this incident as it happened. And they sat me in front of it and they wheeled this thing in, and it was like the Martian flying machine that you had in the Gene Barry 1956-57 film War of the Worlds. It looked like that. And they wheel it out and they put it in front of me and the flashing lights start. I close my eyes and the flashing lights start and nothing happened initially. And I thought, how am I going to get around this? I'm going to have to pretend something happened. And then suddenly it happened, and there was over my left visual field, there was like somebody thrown blue paint across my visual field, and then red paint, and they come together and they start to spin as if I'm being sucked into a tunnel. And I turned round to Dirk and I said, what am I seeing here? Have you changed the colours? And they said, no, it's still white. And I said, can I open my eyes to prove that? And they said, yes. And I opened my eyes and all I could see was white light. Then I saw in my extreme periphery vision on my right hand side, I saw what I can only describe as a breakdown in reality. And I said, can I look down there? Because there's something going on. And they said, yes, your brain's encoded it. And I still cannot believe what I saw. I looked down and I was looking down on the surface of the planet. I was probably 200 or 300 miles in the air, in space, looking down on a planet. I could see the curvature of the planet, and there were these blue lines in checkerboard pattern flickering on and off. I was then subsequently told that what I'd seen was what was called the lights of the world, Carlos Castaneda talks about this. Now, I know Castaneda's questionable, but it was one of the things he talked about. And I then told him to switch it off because I panicked. But for that whole evening, every 10 or 15 minutes, it would start here. And I'd get a vibration in the center of my head and a feeling of flashing. I went to bed that night, and I had the most vivid dreams I'd ever had of snakes. They were mocking me. They were looking down at me. And since then, my dreams have been much more vivid. And there was something powerful about the Lucia device at its most powerful form. Now, in one of my books, I do the neurology of this, and I do how it's to do with the way in which the brain generates light, the way the brain works, the way the brain functions. It's to do with phosphenes. But I believe it's also to do with the generation of endogenous dimethyltryptamine via the pineal gland. And I think under these circumstances, the pineal gland synthesizes melatonin into what is generally known as metatonin, which is endogenously generated dimethyltryptamine. So that's my Lucia experience. Is there anybody else that has had it or been involved in it?
Yeah, I had pretty much the exact same experience that you just talked about. When I first tried it, I saw the face of Zeus really vividly. And that was trying it for, I'm sure I tried it for about a minute before that happened. And then because I've had quite long sessions on it because of like working with the doctors, and they've come and done presentations for my lecture club as well. I've had really quite long sessions on it and combined it with their breathwork techniques that they do in workshops sometimes as well. And during those periods, I saw the traveling along the curve of a planet from a distance, and I've also seen snakes a lot. And you see these intersecting planes, and I think it's similar to dreaming insofar as when you start doing it, it's a sort of visual entrainment device, and you learn to look through the flickering, because first of all it can feel really chaotic because your eyes are trying to follow the movement of the light, and then when your eyes settle upon it and start looking through the visual field, you have this amazing experience of these different planes intersecting, visual planes intersecting. And interestingly, talking to the doctors, I think Engelbert told me that they've got a kind of a friend of theirs who uses it therapeutically to actually help people that suffer from epilepsy to control their symptoms. And it certainly wouldn't be advised for people that have photosensitive epilepsy, but because it can be used as a visual entrainment device, I think if it's used very carefully with certain kind of parameters, it's something that could help people not have seizures, because they learn how to see through the flickering, I guess, and the disturbance that it would usually cause them.
That fascinating. I didn't know that. I didn't know that you'd had very similar experience. That is intriguing, isn't it? Yeah.
So because of the Amanda Ratcliffe interview, I had contacted your mutual friend Sarah Laybourne, and
right.
I had a reading done by her.
Go on.
And she had picked up on the experience that I had after my September 2017 Lucia Light experience that has nothing to do with your brain. It was completely outside of myself, and it was bordering on paranormal / something else.
Will you share that with us? Could you tell us a little bit more?
Well, okay, so it was November 2017, so it was a couple of months later, and it was about 11:30 at night, and I was laying on my bed reading Russell Targ's book on ESP, where he makes the case for ESP after all the work that he did at Stanford. So the lights are on, obviously, I'm reading. Something jumps onto my bed that feels like it's about 3 feet tall and runs up to my headboard, and it's cloaked. Like there's a shimmer, but I feel its weight on the bed. I feel it touching my side, and all of a sudden I become extremely tired. And I felt like something was trying to drug me, and I fought to keep my consciousness. And then I felt like an extreme sense of sleep paralysis, And then there was a moment where it broke through and I went like this to kind of like protect my head, and it stopped my hand, and like my world kind of shattered that moment, that thing that I couldn't see touched me. And then it ran off the end of my bed and into the rest of the room. I tried to come out of the full body sleep paralysis as much as I could. And once I was able to get on my feet, I went through the rest of the house, nothing. And it was so eventful that I actually contacted MUFON and made a report.
Wow. So
and I can't say that it is a direct relationship to the experience with the Lucia Light, but I can say that was one of many very strange experiences. And Susan, right out the gate, was like, ba, ba, ba. And I haven't really told anybody about that other than MUFON. And so I was just like...
Because Susan, as I've said on various occasions, I think is the most extraordinary seer, clairvoyant I know of. Because I don't know if you know, when we did the show with Amanda Radcliffe, Amanda said on that interview that Susan had predicted months ago, because again, they're all mutual friends of mine, but Amanda did not know Susan before she met me or whatever, but she did a reading for her, and in the reading she said, and at that time Amanda was living on Wirral, so she hadn't moved. She said, you're going to move to the south of France, you're going to move to Montségur, and you're going to meet a man there, and you're going to be involved in a movie that is going to be starring Nicolas Cage. Now, that is an absolute precise prediction. And Amanda went down to the south of France, met a man down there. Now, she could have deliberately gone down to the south of France because Susan suggested it. But then the chances of Nicolas Cage reading a script that was associated with Amanda's boyfriend, contacting them, then agreeing to do the movie. And they filmed it, and Amanda became the technical advisor for the movie called The Color Out of Space. It's just extraordinary. Your mind can't even begin to understand that. Now, Lehman, was it the same with you? You don't necessarily have to say about the preciseness of it or the circumstances, but was it similar for you with her?
Yes, and like there was 6 different things that she just like nailed on the head that are not a part of anything that I've ever shared. Matter of fact, she even pointed out that there's these certain things I don't share. And so, yeah, it was next level. And I would easily have another reading with Susan.
Extraordinary. Because I probably mentioned that Susan, I used to do events with Susan, and we used to do regular events at the Arthur Findlay College in Essex here in the UK, and it was called Mediums and Scientists, and I myself would go, myself and the Dirk Procol has been there, and Engelbert Winkler as well. This same event, they were there as well, as was Dr. Alan Roberts, who's been a previous guest here, and they Susan, I've mentioned this many times, but it's still, again, one of the most extraordinary things that has ever happened to me. Susan was lecturing on developing mediumistic skills to a group of people, around about 30, 40 people in the room. And she said, and of course we've got Anthony in the room here, or Tony, and she said, would you come up? And I said, why? And she said, well, I want to see whether we can prove to you that you have mediumistic skills. Now, I'm known for being fairly skeptical about these things, and I'm very... I take a lot of convincing. And she stood up and she said, right, now imagine that you are standing next to you is a woman, and she knows your future, or she can help you. She's your guide. Now, I'd argue that what she was doing, she was making me manifest my daemon. And she said, listen to what she says and listen to what she puts in your mind. And in my mind's eye, I saw an older lady arguing with a younger woman in a kitchen. But what was strange about the kitchen was all the doors had been taken off So there were no doors, there were just frameworks. And I could see this scene, and I just described it. And this woman stands up in the audience and she said, "This is amazing." She said, "I was arguing," and it was the lady I saw. I'm sure it was the lady I saw in the vision. And she said that I'm a school teacher, and I was arguing with one of my young students because of which university she wanted to go to or not want to go to. And she said, "But the extraordinary thing is your other description," because she said, "The reason I'm away this weekend is I've been planning this for weeks. So I had arranged for the doors to be taken off my kitchen and new doors put on the frames. So I'd have a new kitchen when I got back." And I'm sitting there going, I cannot believe that. This is like, again, the Graham Nichols bit, where you have something that happens that you're told about, which you cannot explain in any rational sense. Had Susan placed that image in my head? What was it? I know that happened. And people, and the skeptics can turn around till the cows come home. I know that happened.
Anthony.
Yeah.
Anthony, can I interrupt real quick? This always, when you talk about stories like this always reminds me of the story of you catching Penny when she fell down the stairs.
Yep.
How did you, I mean, I still think about that all the time because that's one of the most incredible stories I've ever heard.
Yeah.
You want to tell them how that went?
Yeah, it was extraordinary. When I was living up on Wirral, I had a study downstairs in my house, and around about next to the study was another room. Then there was a straightforward staircase going upstairs to the upstairs part of the house. One Sunday morning, I'm in the study, and I hear my wife Penny scream, and I sit there and I go, "Oh right, what's the problem? I know, it's a spider. There's a spider in the bath and she's gone freaked about the spider." And then something makes me think, no, there's something wrong here. So I find myself getting up and running to the bottom of the stairs. I get to the bottom of the stairs to see Penny in mid-air, coming down the stairs towards me, flying in the air. She tripped at the top of the stairs. I managed to be able to angle my hand to catch her head and to catch her, because she's quite slight, and I would manage to catch her, and my hand smashed against the corner of the door stop like that there, and my hand hit it. So Penny's head would have hit there. She'd have been killed. So I'm standing there, we're shaking, and it took us about 2 or 3 minutes to just recover. And I said, "Penny, when did you scream?" And she said, "When I started falling." And I said, "You can't have done. That's impossible." And I timed it. And again, on my YouTube site, on my Facebook site, and I'll put it on YouTube if you want on this as well, I filmed using a handheld camera how much it would take me to get from when I was sitting down to the bottom of the stairs. Now, remember, I'd had all these thought patterns of what was she doing? Why was she screaming? Spiders in the bath, all this kind of stuff had all gone through my head. It took me I think it was 3.5 to 4 seconds to cover the distance. But she says, quite categorically, she only screamed when she started falling. Now, what did I do there? Did I dilate time? Did I go back in time? Did I extend time to save her life? Or was it that my daemon knew that last time round Penny was killed from that fall or seriously injured? But we sat there and we shook for ages, and we still talk about this now. Now, my wife is very grounded. She is not the kind of person that ever believes in even anything I write particularly. But she knows that happened, and we've discussed it. It's impossible, absolutely impossible. And it is. There's no possibility that could have happened. I warped reality at that point. That's the only thing I could explain. So thank you for that. That was great. Thanks for the reminder, Laura.
I love that story.
Right, I'm aware now, guys, that we're over our time now. So just thank you to everybody for joining in with us today. It's been a fascinating discussion, and we will do this again. We wanted to experiment, Sarah and I, to see how this would work, and I think you would all agree with me that as a principle, it works very well.
Yes.
particularly if we get better at putting people's hands up and everything as well. It's just balancing, having people get the opportunity to speak. And I think what we will do next time we will do it where we'll have a theme. So we'll have either a subject and everybody can share their experiences. And again, you know, Sarah, we need to really seriously think about starting this book club up in the new year as well, and maybe take Danny's suggestion, or we'll go with the Olaf Stapledon and then do Danny's suggestion afterwards. And if you're all willing to be involved in that book club, I think that could be fascinating, because then, you know,
I'm willing.
Wonderful. Good. Good. Okay, everybody. Thanks again. Sarah, is there anything you'd like to finally say before we wave our weary way home?
No, I don't think so. But I guess this will be the last time that we see anyone before Christmas. So I hope you all have like a really wonderful holiday, relaxing, great time, and stay healthy and happy. And we'll see you in 2022, which I reckon is going to be a really good year.
I do too.
As somebody posted recently, though, they said if you turn around and say 2022, and it's like 2020 times 2, or the second version of 2020, which is then quite disturbing. But thanks, guys, and you have a wonderful Christmas and everything else. And believe me, you're the guys that make it all work for me. You know, without all this, it doesn't mean anything. What means it is the people involved in it. And that's the great thing. And you guys are fantastic. We have a fantastic egregore we're creating here. And I think this has reinforced it today. So please, when this is posted, please share it on your Facebook wall. It will be up literally probably first thing tomorrow morning on my YouTube site. So it's there for free viewing. Get it in front of your friends' noses. Say, this is the kind of stuff we're involved in here. This is what we're trying to do. So thanks, everybody. Wonderful. And have a wonderful Christmas. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.